Boston, 1874. A seemingly innocent 9-year-old girl, Mary Whitmore, arrives at one of the city's most prestigious families. But beneath her quiet smile lies a chilling force capable of unraveling minds and shattering lives. As those around her spiral into madness and despair, a doctor's desperate quest begins to confront the dark unknown lurking behind a child's angelic face. This is the story of Mary Whitmore, where innocence masks a terrifying psychological horror. Part 1, The Arrival, Boston, 1874. A city of sharp contrasts. Gas lamps flickered in darkening streets beneath towering brick buildings, while the air was thick with the weight of history and whispers of progress. Beacon Hill stood at the heart of the city, a neighborhood defined by the grandeur of its white row houses and the intellect of its inhabitants. The Cartwright family townhouse was one such residence, a bastion of order and elegance where Henry Cartwright, a shipping magnate of note, and his wife Eleanor, a patron of the arts and quiet philanthropist, lived a life of cultivated grace for years. The Cartwrights had longed for a child to complete their family, a hope that had slipped away like a distant dream. Fate, it seemed, had another design when Mary Whitmore, a 9-year-old orphan from the St. Jude's foundling home, was brought to their threshold on a chilly, late autumn afternoon. Mary arrived in a modest carriage, on a day where the golden hues of falling leaves mixed with the soft mist drifting over Boston's cobblestone streets. She stepped delicately onto the doorstep, holding a small, worn book of poetry close to her chest. Her dark hair curled loosely around a pale, almost translucent face, like a fragile porcelain doll freshly unearthed. Eleanor greeted Mary with an embrace so warm, it seemed to promise solace for all the years of yearning left unspoken. Henry, reserved and pragmatic, glanced over the child with cautious optimism, his mind cataloguing data more than emotions. But there was something about Mary, a stillness that perplexed him, the way her dark eyes met his with a steady, calculating gaze, unbefitting a typical child. The household staff watched with a mixture of curiosity and unease as Mary appeared to glide through the rooms with the poise of a much older soul. She learned quickly. Lessons came with astonishing ease, and she spoke only when spoken to, uttering perfectly measured words that hinted at awareness far beyond her years. To the Cartwrights' friends and acquaintances, Mary was the embodiment of resilience and innocence, a tender flower sprung from tragedy's ashes. Yet beneath the surface of compliance and charm, a different story was unfolding unbeknownst to all but a few. Dr. Alistair Finch, the family physician and a respected figure in Boston's medical circles, was summoned to the house to attend to Henry's recurring gout. It was during his visit that he first met Mary. The introduction was brief. In the grand drawing room, Mary curtsied perfectly, eyes fixed on his face with unsettling intensity. Finch, a man of science trained by the great Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., recorded his initial impression in his private journals. Whereas most children possess an innocent curiosity, Mary's gaze was clinical, evaluative, the eyes of a scientist dissecting a complex mechanism. To Finch, it felt like being under the scrutiny of a master craftsman inspecting a clock's delicate gears. In the days following Mary's arrival, the atmosphere within the Cartwright household began to shift imperceptibly. Mrs. Gable, the head housekeeper, whose stern demeanor had kept the house running smoothly for 2 decades, became unsettled. She spoke of whispers in the moonlit corridors and the feeling of being watched, even when alone. Her once steady hands trembled, and her sharp mind faltered in small, alarming ways. The family's 2 Irish setters, creatures known for their gentle loyalty, recoiled at Mary's presence. Their hair stood on end as they whined low warnings, avoiding the child's path with a palpable sense of dread. While Henry dismissed this as mere adjustment, Dr. Finch sensed an underlying threat that defied natural explanation. Mary's behavior was equally extraordinary. She never caused disturbance with noise or tantrums. Instead, she moved silently through the house's polished halls, appearing at just the right moment to offer water before a headache could be uttered, or touching a hand with deceptive warmth as sadness crept in. No complaint escaped her lips. No tears stained her cheeks, despite a history that should have borne the weight of grief. To all around her, Mary was a portrait of composure, a child shaped by hardship, yet endowed with a startling calm. But behind that serene exterior lay an intellect probing the minds of those around her. Cataloguing vulnerabilities and weaknesses with unnerving precision, Finch's journals reflect a growing dread, a fear that this child was not simply enduring suffering, but wielding it as a weapon. As autumn waned and harsh winter loomed, the Cartwright house bore the weight of an unseen presence. The quiet shadows lengthened into dark corners where madness would soon take root. Mary Whitmore had arrived as a child, but she was no ordinary child. In the chilling stillness of her stormy eyes lay a power unlike any the city had ever known. Part 2. The First Victims. The eerie calm in the Cartwright household is shattered not by screams or violence, but by a subtle unraveling that begins to creep beneath the surface of the family's carefully maintained order. Those closest to Mary Whitmore start to change, each becoming ensnared in a silent, psychological torment that none can explain. Mrs. Gable, the stalwart head housekeeper, who for 2 decades managed the household with unyielding control, begins to show signs that something is amiss. Once unshakable and commanding, she becomes irritable, forgetful, and plagued by paranoia. She whispers of hearing voices in empty corridors, soft footsteps that fade when she turns, and cold eyes watching her from shadows. Her composed demeanor cracks, turning into trembling hands and sleepless nights. Her rapid mental decline confounds the household, dismissed as the natural toll of age, but Dr. Finch notes a more dangerous pattern emerging. Meanwhile, the household's 2 Irish setters, animals once protective and affectionate, grow hostile in Mary's presence. Their hair stands on end as they growl low warnings and retreat from her offers of treat and affection. Henry Cartwright rationalizes this as the dogs adjusting to the presence of a new child, but Dr. Finch, with his knowledge of animal behavior, senses a deeper unrest. The animals, it seems, recognize a threat invisible to the human eye. The first true casualty of Mary's quiet influence is Miss Agatha Croft, the governess hired to oversee Mary's education. A woman in her late 30s educated at Cambridge, Miss Croft was initially delighted by Mary's intelligence and obedience, but within 6 weeks a profound change takes hold. Miss Croft is ravaged by insomnia, pacing her room all night, plagued by vivid nightmares that haunt her waking hours. She becomes consumed by paranoia, convinced the other staff are conspiring against her. Books disappear from her bedside, diary pages go missing, and she grows distrustful and fearful. During one visit, she confides in Dr. Finch, whispering that Mary's gaze lingers too long during lessons, watching her as if waiting for a crack in a fragile vase. "She is not learning from me," Miss Croft admits tremulously. "She is studying me, and I fear she is finding what she seeks." Despite prescriptions for a tonic, Miss Croft's mental state deteriorates rapidly. She is found one day weeping uncontrollably, unable to recall her own name, a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. She is quietly dismissed and committed to a private sanatorium, her career in ruins. It is Mary who first alerts Eleanor to the governess's breakdown, her voice a perfect imitation of childhood concern. "I think something is wrong with Miss Croft. She is crying and saying things that do not make sense," she reports. The Cartwrights praise Mary's sensitivity, blind to the cold calculation behind her words. The look in Mary's eyes as the governess departs is not one of sorrow but detached curiosity. Dr. Finch, troubled and haunted by Miss Croft's confession, begins to keep a secret file, hidden from official records, chronicling the strange and rapid fall of those around Mary. He asks himself a terrifying question. Can one person act as a poison, not to the body but directly to the mind? As winter settles over Boston, another victim falls captive to Mary's silent torment. The family's butler, Mr. Alastair Jennings, a man of unwavering routine and robustness, begins suffering debilitating migraines and startling memory lapses. Once able to recite every detail of household inventories and family histories, Jennings forgets where to find wine, misplaces important correspondence, and calls Henry by his late father's name. Jennings confides in Dr. Finch that the episodes worsen after spending time in Mary's company. The child's endless questions about his life, his late wife, and his duties feel like gentle but relentless interrogations, forcing him to relive painful memories again and again. Mary's polite curiosity wears down the butler's mental defenses, leaving him confused and fragmented. When Mary finds Jennings collapsed clutching his head, she calmly alerts Mrs. Cartwright, describing his symptoms in clinical detail that astonishes Dr. Finch. Her demeanor is that of a detached observer, a physician studying an experiment. Jennings is forced into early retirement, a broken man carried away under the weight of his collapse. The Cartwright household grows heavier with unease. 2 pillars of their staff have crumbled in months, yet the family remains blind to the true cause. Their affection for Mary deepening as she steadily tightens her grip, but the shadow of Mary's influence is now turning inward. Edward, the 12-year-old nephew of Henry's sister, is a lively boy initially dismissive of Mary as a quiet doll to be teased. But Mary's calm persistence draws him in, and soon his personality darkens. He becomes withdrawn, plagued by night terrors of a shadowy figure watching silently from his room's corners. His laughter fades, replaced by screams that haunt the household at night, while weight loss and exhaustion paint a chilling picture of a childhood stolen. Dr. Finch, increasingly alarmed, observes Mary's interactions with Edward. She is his sole confidant, spending hours in his room reading to an attentive boy whose eyes betray a terror Mary methodically fans with horrifying tales of being buried alive. This is no ghost story, but a clinical terror carefully implanted into his mind. Finch bursts into the room to confront the scene, a pale, trembling Edward clinging to sanity, and Mary, calm and inscrutable, explaining her actions with disturbing innocence. "I was just trying to make him feel better about his fear of the dark," she says softly, turning terror into a calculated study of human fragility. Dr. Finch realizes that Mary is not a passive force caught in tragedy, but an active conductor of psychological destruction. Her experiment is unfolding, each victim a subject in a terrifying study of human suffering and mind's breaking points. Part 3, Mind Games, deepen with the household staff fracturing and Edward's terrifying transformation underway. Mary's psychological experiment grows ever more sinister and intricate. The invisible web she weaves tightens around the Cartwright family and those who serve them, revealing a mind cold, calculating and cruel beyond its years. Dr. Finch, driven by a mounting sense of dread and a scientific need for answers, begins a careful investigation into Mary's past. He visits St. Jude's foundling home, where the orphanage staff reluctantly share tales of a child who, even among orphans, was curious and unnerving. Mary's influence was felt here long before the Cartwrights, a shadowy presence sowing discord quietly. Fights among children mysteriously ignited at her instigation, fears planted and nurtured with surgical precision. One young bully developed a crippling fear of birds after Mary's whispered stories. Another, her only friend, fell silent, never speaking again. The threads of Mary's quiet manipulations bind tighter every day in the Cartwright household. Finch watches her, noting how she studies each person, not with the naivety of a child, but with the detached precision of a researcher. Conversations with Mary reveal her unique nature. She simulates emotion but does not feel it, explores grief as a concept without grief itself. When Finch speaks of loss and sadness, she performs the appropriate reactions flawlessly, her eyes betraying only cold analysis. One chilling conversation reveals the terrifying intellect at work. "Doctor?" Mary asks, her voice calm and measured. "At what point does a memory become more real than the present? Can a person be made to live inside a nightmare even when awake?" Such questions, delivered by the innocent mouth of a child, send a chill through Finch's soul. He knows she is not merely a curiosity or victim, but a predator, a being whose study is human suffering itself. Finch's suspicions deepen when he discovers a hidden wooden box concealed behind a panel in Mary's room, a collection of trophies like a hunter's spoils. Personal items of her victims lie together: a silver hairpin belonging to Miss Croft, a brass cufflink from Mr. Jennings, a small tin soldier for young Edward, and a delicate lace handkerchief marked as the next prize, the family matriarch, Eleanor Cartwright. Accompanying these tokens are clinical notes, written in an elegant script far beyond a child's expected skill. Each victim is catalogued with chilling precision. Miss Croft: high intelligence, prone to anxiety. Method: subtle gaslighting and auditory suggestion. Result: paranoia and cognitive breakdown in 43 days. Mr. Jennings: anchored by memory and routine. Method: evoking trauma and disrupting patterns. Result: migraines, memory fragmentation. Edward: emotionally immature, fear of dark, exploited. Method: implantation of phobia through narrative. Result: severe night terrors and withdrawal. Finch's horror crystallizes. This is no random madness, but a systematic assault, the methodical destruction of mind, orchestrated by a child who lacks empathy and wields psychological manipulation as a weapon. The shadow now falls on Eleanor Cartwright. Finch understands Mary's experiment has reached its penthouse target, the strongest wall in the family fortress to bring down. Despite the weight of this knowledge, Finch is isolated in his fears. Whom will believe that a child orchestrates such devastation? The Cartwrights adore their new daughter. Society would dismiss Finch as mad to suggest a child's innocence masks such darkness. In a desperate measure, Finch partners with Dr. Silas Weir, superintendent of the McLean Asylum, a man open to unconventional approaches. Together they devise a plan. Finch will become Eleanor's primary caregiver, gaining access to observe Mary's interactions closely, while Weir places discreet nurses within the household, serving as his eyes and ears. The stage is set for the ultimate confrontation between science and silence, sanity and subversion, where Mary remains the master puppeteer in a deadly game of psychological warfare. Part 4. The Monster Exposed. The Cartwright townhouse, once a bastion of order and intellectual grace, now hummed with an uneasy tension, a delicate facade slowly cracking beneath pressures invisible to the untrained eye. Inside, Eleanor Cartwright, the esteemed lady of the house, found herself unwinding in ways no one had anticipated. Her poised demeanor, cultivated through years of social expectation, began to falter as nightmarish doubt seeped into her consciousness. Long nights turned restless. She tossed beneath heavy blankets as shadows lengthened around her bedchamber. The silence seemed to grow thick with breathless anticipation. From the window, the gas lamps outside flickered uncertainly in the cold wind, casting elongated phantoms on the walls. She shivered, not out of cold, but from an unnamed fear, the steady pressure of unseen eyes watching, waiting. Mary Whitmore was always near, a constant presence by her side. Mary read aloud softly from the Bible, her voice a soothing melody weaving through passages about madness, sin, and divine punishment. She handled Eleanor with the delicate touch of a nurse, yet carried the mind of a calculating guardian, or perhaps a captor. Dr. Alistair Finch had gradually become Eleanor's primary caregiver, granted unfettered access to the household under the guise of treating her nervous condition. Each day, behind the polished veneer of polite society, he observed Mary's work with mounting horror. Her weapons weren't bludgeons or knives, but shadows, whispers, herbal infusions, strategically deployed psychological assaults. Her herbal teas contained just enough belladonna to cloud the mind, induce subtle hallucinations, and shatter the fragile mental constructs Eleanor clung to so tightly. Finch analyzed the tea carefully, noting how the poison's effects served not to kill, but to disorient, like a painter blurring the edges of a masterpiece. Mary's tactics extended beyond chemical warfare. She would rearrange Eleanor's furniture during the night, creating an atmosphere where certainty itself dissolved. Chairs were found on opposite sides of the room, picture frames slightly tilted, doors left unlocked or firmly closed, small disturbances that cultivated a creeping sense of confusion, making even the familiar unrecognizable. During Eleanor's waking hours, Mary whispered contradictions and half-truths, questioning Eleanor's memories, casting doubt on her own thoughts. She was both comfort and tormentor, an innocent angel one moment and a relentless tormentor the next. Mary's soft voice was a sedative and a sharpened sword, slicing through Eleanor's psyche with surgical precision. To the discreet nurses placed by Dr. Silas Weir within the household, Mary was a case study in manipulation herself. They reported daily on Mary's behavior, how she whispered softly into Eleanor's half-conscious ears, how she sowed paranoia with quiet, deliberate actions, how her measured demeanor concealed a ruthless intellect driven to dismantle. The storm outside gathered strength as winter deepened. On one night in late February, the sky stretched heavy and black, wind thrashing against window panes and rattling doors. Dr. Finch was summoned urgently to the household. With heart pounding, he climbed the grand staircase, summoned by a tension that tightened his chest like a vice. Outside Eleanor's locked bedroom door, silence reigned except for the lashing rain and distant thunder. Finch hesitated, then forced the door open with the aid of one of the nurses. Inside, Eleanor sat motionless near the cold, unlit hearth. Her eyes stared outward, but were empty, windows to a soul lost in catatonia. Her breathing was steady but stripped of life's spark. She did not respond to calls or touch, a beautiful woman hollowed out by the slow decay of mind. At her feet sat Mary, calm, composed, a quiet conductor of destruction. She lifted a lock of Eleanor's long hair and brushed it gently, meeting Finch's gaze with a serene, almost triumphant smile. "The experiment is complete," Mary said softly, voice smooth as polished glass. "The fortress has fallen." With chilling clarity, Mary recounted the steps she had taken to dismantle Eleanor's mind. The fear she unearthed was not of death or disease, but the terror of emptiness, the sensation of being an abandoned, empty room with no self to hold on to. Mary had opened the doors to Eleanor's deepest, most buried memories: loneliness, loss, the spectral echo of abandonment, and made them unbearably real. Her calm voice hardened for the first time. What happens to a man of science when faced with a darkness beyond cure or explanation? "I am no longer the child you see. I am the nightmare science cannot catch." Suddenly the nurses stepped forward, shedding their guide as servant. With trained precision they moved to restrain Mary. The child, cornered, transformed. Silent innocence replaced by savage fury. She bit and scratched with a terrifying intensity, a predator desperate to escape. The struggle was brief but fierce. The nurses subdued Mary, holding her fast amid the raging storm outside. Dr. Finch stood frozen, heart hammering, as the terrifying calm broke into chaos. The broken figure of Eleanor, the fierce captive child, and the storm outside mirrored the destruction unleashed within those walls. When the authorities arrived, no crime scene awaited them. No blood, no weapon, only a silent woman and a quiet child. The law, blind to the unseen, found no grounds for prosecution. Mary's prediction held true. No one would believe the darkness lurking behind that angelic facade. Alone with his journals and haunted by the encounter, Dr. Finch understood. Music had been played on the strings of the human mind, a melody of destruction conducted by a master disguised as a child. Part 5. The Fall and Aftermath. The storm that once battered the streets of Beacon Hill had long since passed, but the devastation it left in the Cartwright household's wake echoed across years and continents. Eleanor Cartwright, the proud matriarch reduced to a silent shell, was committed to the McLean Asylum, where she would spend the remainder of her days locked in a catatonic trance. Henry Cartwright, her devoted husband, returned from London to find his life shattered, his fortune drained by years of care, his family broken beyond repair. Mary Whitmore, the enigmatic architect behind this destruction, was also sent to the asylum, but not as a patient like Eleanor. Under the watchful eyes of Dr. Alistair Finch and Dr. Silas Weir, she was classified as a unique subject, a living embodiment of a form of darkness that medicine had only begun to glimpse. Her confinement was a grand experiment, a study in human psychopathy and psychological siphoning of power. Dr. Finch spent hundreds of hours with Mary, attempting to map the contours of her extraordinary mind. Yet Mary adapted swiftly. She transformed her incarceration into a sinister laboratory, refining her abilities with chilling ease. She learned to mimic emotions, tears on command, contrition expressed with heartbreaking sincerity, and eloquent discussions of her supposed illness gleaned from medical texts placed within her reach. Many of the junior staff were charmed by this facade of a traumatized but brilliant child, making miraculous progress. But Dr. Finch was not fooled. He observed the subtle ripples of manipulation spreading through the asylum ward. Mary wove discord between patients, creating paranoia and distrust with a quiet, almost playful cruelty. Her understanding of human psychology deepened with each passing day, her intellect growing ever more dangerous. A breakthrough came with the arrival of Dr. Martha Lancaster, a pioneering psychiatrist from Philadelphia. She noticed Mary's use of art therapy and the innocent drawings she produced, flowers, animals, peaceful houses, but using her knowledge of cryptography, Dr. Lancaster discerned hidden codes embedded within the imagery. The drawings were in fact detailed psychological profiles of the staff, exposing fears, vanities, and weaknesses. They also contained carefully crafted escape plans and strategies for manipulation beyond the asylum walls. Through these codes, Mary demonstrated a level of foresight and cold calculation that terrified even the most seasoned professionals. Her mastery of psychological warfare was unprecedented. In the summer of 1877, shortly after her 12th birthday, Mary disappeared. Official accounts claimed she was transferred at the request of a private benefactor to a facility overseas. Dr. Finch knew this was untruth. The real story was darker. Mary had studied the system meticulously, identified its weakest points, and manipulated her way to freedom. Her departure from the McLean Asylum was as silent and devastating as her arrival. Those left behind in her ward showed violent and inexplicable hysteria, as if a puppeteer's strings had been severed. Across Europe, tales surfaced of a brilliant young woman whose presence left chaos in its wake. Wealthy industrialists mysteriously lost fortunes before taking their own lives. Diplomats and artists fell into ruin under undiagnosed psychological assaults. The pattern was unmistakable. Mary's signature marked every shattered mind and broken life. The Cartwright townhouse eventually sold, becoming a haunted relic whispered about in hushed tones. It was said to be gripped by sorrow and confusion, a monument not to ghosts but to a family undone from within. Dr. Finch, haunted by the ghost of the child he failed to contain, retreated from mainstream medicine to pursue solitary research. His journals, hidden for decades due to family shame, finally surfaced, as foundational texts on criminal psychopathy. In his final writing, Finch pondered the terrifying truth. We have strived to heal the body and treat the mind's diseases, yet never considered that the mind itself could become the disease. Mary Whitmore was not broken. She was a different kind of human, one who sees others not as peers, but puzzles to be solved and dismantled for sport. Mary's legacy remains an unsettling enigma, a haunting reflection, fragility of human connection, and the possibility that for some, empathy is not genuine, but a tool wielded to devastating effect. The question lingers: did Mary continue her dark experiments beyond the asylum, or did she find some semblance of humanity? Closing. Mary Whitmore's haunting tale forces us to confront the darkest corners of the human mind, a place where innocence can mask unspeakable power and where empathy might be twisted into a weapon. Her silent psychological warfare reminds us that not all monsters are visible and not all horrors roar. Sometimes they whisper. As we close this chapter of history, we are left with a chilling question. Is evil born, or is it a shadow we shape ourselves? Thank you for joining this journey into a forgotten nightmare. Please share your thoughts and theories about Mary Whitmore's fate in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and beware the shadows that lurk beneath the surface.